Hello, everybody, and welcome to this AFC South Show 140. I'm the host of the channel. My name is Curtis, and with us tonight, James Roy, N1 Texans fan on YouTube. Check out his YouTube channel. Go like and subscribe to it. Just eclipsed the 700 mark. Like to see that keep going up for him. With us, as always, our resident Colts fan. Speak softly and carry a big steck, Jeff Steckel. And then we're going to be covering all the wild card games. So Texans fans, just wait. We're going to get to it. It's going to be fun. All right. But first off, let's try to get 35 likes on this episode. We haven't done a sub goal in a while. Let's try to hit 20 subs. Reaction pods typically do pretty solid. So hopefully we can hit that goal. If we do, I don't know. Maybe we'll release only Jeffs.com. I don't know. But without any further ado, let's get into it. Starting off, Kansas City Chiefs, Dolphins. Kansas City Chiefs won 26-7 over the Dolphins in a game where the Chiefs defense took over early and did not really allow the Dolphins to even breathe. Tyreek Hill had the one 53-yard touchdown, which was their only score of the game. And beyond that, the Dolphins looked absolutely pedestrian to what we've become accustomed to with the Mike McDaniels offense, and we associate him with genius, almost like we used to do back in the day with Adam Gase before he became a head coach somewhere. You guys got any comments on that game?
It went about as expected. I mean, that cold weather is a concern that I have as a Texans fan moving forward. It's really the lesser of two evils though with that. But I mean, I was surprised at how much it affected the Dolphins offense. The story was the Dolphins offense number one in the league, scored 7 points. The Browns defense number one in the league, gave up 45. So I mean, it's the playoffs; anything can happen. But the game result was not unexpected.
Yeah. Jeff's kids must be trying to say hello, I assume.
Yeah, they're getting excited over the game.
Classic.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's playoff, baby. I'm excited. Every game, every matchup. I don't care that it's cold. It's football weather. Now, yeah, Houston's not going to be used to it, but what are you going to do?
CJ will be used to it. It's just the rest of the team that I'm worried about.
Well, we know that Nico can do it. He played at Michigan, right? So, I mean, at least in theory.
In theory.
Jeff, Kansas City Dolphins?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, it wasn't too out of hand going into the second half, so I'm not really sure why the Dolphins were doing what they were doing. Like, Mostert with 8 carries, and he was, in my opinion, one of the better backs this year. So I'm not really sure why his usage was so low. I mean, he averaged 4 yards per attempt. I don't really know what the Dolphins were trying to do there, but I mean, I expected the Chiefs win, but to kind of pull away like that, I didn't really see that coming. But I did have the Chiefs winning. So, the result was the same. It's just I didn't really expect the Dolphins to kind of collapse the way they did.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of felt like it was definitely a possibility with the injuries and everything that they had coming into the game. Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips and Van Ginkel got hurt the week before. So, I mean, they're down to their 4th and 5th edge rushers. You're not going to get any pressure with that, especially on the Chiefs' offensive line, which is outside of Juwan Taylor, not a liability at all. So, let's shift to one of the games today. Buffalo Bills 31, Pittsburgh Steelers 17. Game win is expected.
Thank you, Jaguars, for that one.
Yeah.
They are liable for that travesty that was that matchup. The Colts 100% would have performed 10 times better as the 7 seed. I can think of basically any other team but the Steelers that was contending for that seed probably would have given a better fight.
Yeah. The Steelers win games because of defense. Defense could not do much today. Jeff, anything?
No, I completely agree with James. The game went about as I had expected. I mean, you said we were going to wait to do this podcast before, and I'm like, the Bills are going to win. It'll save you some time. I guess it was pretty much a heavy thud for Pittsburgh, so it's kind of what I expected. They just, depending on what Colts team would have showed up, they probably could have taken it to the Bills a little better, or it just kind of depended on what version. But I didn't expect Pittsburgh to do much against Buffalo in Buffalo, so
Yeah.
it pretty much went exactly as I thought it would.
I will say, with the amount of snow that fell, I was surprised there wasn't like permafrost looking field playing on. You know what I mean?
The
Instead,
pictures I saw of the field beforehand looked a lot worse than what it ended up coming out to be.
yeah. Like the moment I turned on the game, I looked at the field and I was like, oh, we're good. There's not gonna be a problem at all.
I wanted some snow, man.
Yeah, no, me too.
It's worth noting. I just saw a notification from ESPN. Mike Tomlin walked out of the presser after that game very abruptly, and
Yeah.
I'd say that of the current head coaches with Bill Belichick, out in New England, that Mike Tomlin's like next up on the list of like solid head coaches that definitely would be hot candidates if they were let go.
Yeah.
No.
So
He walked out. He walked
because of a question about his future.
Yeah. They asked him about his one year left on his deal, and he just left.
I can't imagine that they. I mean, I think he's only had like one losing season. I can't imagine.
He's never had a losing season.
Oh, he's never had one. I thought he had one. Okay, I can't imagine cutting him loose. I mean, that's a lot of sustained success. I mean, he went into this with Mason. It's just.
Yeah.
The question you have to ask yourself is,
I think he did the
get
most
better with a different candidate. And I mean, I think it's similar looking in the AFC South at like Tennessee letting go of Mike Vrabel. Is it Mike Vrabel's fault that team is awful, or is it roster construction and management? And I think to this point, like if I'm pointing the finger in Pittsburgh, I'm pointing it at the GM and what they've done. They've managed to maintain a pretty good defense, but they just can't put it together offensively.
Yeah.
There's one position I can point to that's causing that too.
Yep. Another not a surprise game in a way. The Green Bay Packers 48, Cowboys 32. Now, I say it's not a surprise in the outcome because the Packers own the Cowboys in the playoffs. Now, prior to this, obviously, it's been Aaron Rodgers, delivering the nail in the coffin of the Cowboys season. But Jordan Love comes in, plays solid, gets a beautiful 48 points in Dallas at a place where hardly anybody could do anything all season long. Pretty solid.
I just want to know where this Aaron Jones was during the damn regular season when I had him on my team. He pretty much put. I mean, the Packers all around offensively did a great job, but I think he scored at least the first 2 touchdowns for the team, and I know he grabbed one later on, but man, he put the team on the back, and Dallas couldn't do shit until they rolled out like their 4th string.
Yeah.
So Jordan Love, I really didn't think that he would really amount to much in the season. Like, I honestly didn't expect much of him, and he's kind of proven me wrong. I'm not going to say he's putting up like a CJ Stroud season, but by any means. But man, he's playing pretty solid. And he had a great game against Dallas, who throughout the season I thought had one of the better defenses, and they looked terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say once again, it mirrors what the Browns did against the Texans.
Mm-hmm.
The Cowboys defense just didn't show up to play. That was, as explosive as the Cowboys offense can be this season with Tony Pollard not performing to the level a lot of people thought he would. They've relied pretty heavily on a sturdy defense, and as soon as Love started lighting them up, I knew that game was pretty much going to go that way. I did have some, I don't want to say hope, but I had some belief in me that the Cowboys were going to show up and be better because I felt like this was different than previous years, but it's just the same Cowboys. I mean, they just disappointed.
Yeah, I think
in AT&T Stadium.
Yeah. There's some sort of curse they got to work out. Jerry Jones's ghost is already haunting it or something.
I honestly think I took the Cowboys in this one. I really didn't expect Green Bay to go in and do what they did. So I actually know better.
Yeah. Green Bay, San Francisco playing the Dallas Cowboys in the playoffs. Always Green Bay and San Francisco. In kind of an emotional game, Detroit 24, LA Rams 23. say emotional because of all the storylines surrounding the two quarterbacks in the game. But yeah, and most of the post-game press conferences, half the players were crying. So it was a pretty good game. I kind of fell asleep in a little bit of it, but what I watched, it was pretty good.
It was huge. There's a lot of good storylines with it. I mean, I think that any NFL fan I don't want to say any NFL fan and speak for the whole fandom, but like for me personally, I love a good narrative or storyline in a game that doesn't involve the Texans to kind of draw me in. Like one of the reasons I was okay with the Rams winning the 2021 Super Bowl was because Matt Stafford was going to get his first Super Bowl. It was either that or the Bengals getting their first Super Bowl. I will say this game, the result is nice. I like seeing the Lions win in this particular matchup just because I want to see them go deep. You know, having somewhat being able to identify with them somewhat throughout the Texans' history of like long stretches. This, granted, is a really long stretch without any success. You know, it's nice to see them do that. I do feel like the game's tainted a little bit in terms of just the general officiating was just kind of low grade, like worse than it usually is. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of calls that were made where my problem with it wasn't that the calls were wrong; it's that they were inconsistent.
Okay.
It felt like for one team a pass interference was different than the other, and in general that kind of put a damper on it. But I got the result I wanted, so I don't personally hate it.
Jeff?
Yeah, I did terrible on the pick'ems this week, but I think I took the Rams in this one. Just kind of all the narrative was that the Lions are going to send Matthew Stafford packing. I know not all the fans were like that, but the disrespect against Stafford was pretty real. Like they never really, aside from Calvin Johnson, really put much of a team around him. But it's a feel good story for Detroit. They finally hosted a playoff game and got the win out of it. And I don't think any of this game you could actually fault Stafford for it. I thought he played more than well enough to win. They didn't. I mean, Kyron Williams had some. He had a good average, but I don't think they ran him enough. And they had a lot of issues in the red zone. I think they scored like 1 or 2 field goals on 3 or 4 trips. It was pretty pedestrian when they got into the red zone. So it was just, I think it was pretty predictable. They were going to Cooper Kupp, and they weren't, I guess, creative enough in the red zone. But I mean, it was a great game. I am happy to see Detroit, move forward finally, kind of shake some of those
Cobwebs?
old losing cobwebs. Yeah, those losing ways, they've kind of shaken that off. So I'm happy to see them move on.
Yeah. With the guy that they, got in a deal where they shipped everything and the kitchen sink out of town. That's pretty solid. I mean, honestly, I feel like if you want to look at the Rams-Lions trade now, I think it's almost a win-win.
I feel that. I mean, I think that Jared Goff, in most people's eyes, was viewed as a bridge quarterback until the Lions could find a better solution, and it got really close to that. I feel like there were a lot of points early in his tenure with the Lions where people were like, okay, the Lions have to get a quarterback this offseason. There's no chance. So for him to, be as good as he's been this season has been incredible. I think that if DeMar Hamlin hadn't died and come to life on the football field, that the comeback player of the year conversation might be, Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, and Joe Flacco. But instead, I think Goff is the odd man out when you throw DeMar Hamlin into that conversation. So
Yeah. Yeah, I was hoping Mechie would have supplanted himself into that same conversation. Just not quite ready yet.
at least he showed up.
Yeah.
I mean, he
Yeah.
had a couple of catches. Him and Hutchinson. It was really incredible to see them actually contribute in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And with Noah Brown out for the rest of the year, now we're going to need him a little bit more.
Yeah, you think they called Jarvis Landry?
Doubtful. Doubtful. I don't think Jarvis Landry's got the wheels like he used to. He might be reliable like a Robert Woods, but my son is playing right now. Can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you, bud. I don't know what wide receivers on the market would be worth a call at the moment, but there's not many. Speaking of which, let's briefly talk about the game that's happening right now. Philadelphia Eagles, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. As of this moment, the Buccaneers are in the lead 13-3 with 6:19 left in the second quarter. I kind of saw the Bucs winning this game. The Eagles kind of for falling all over themselves, getting into the playoffs down the stretch. Lost the 1 seed, lost the division along the way, and then Hurts has had the flu, and now, as James had mentioned, dislocated his finger. So yeah, I mean it's about as expected, boys.
I think that it stands to reason, and I think that Jeff will back me up on this, having benefited from the departure of one of those coordinators from Philly. That you have to look at Nick Sirianni, and there's obviously other external factors, but the fact that Shane Steichen and what's his face, Jonathan Gannon, both left, have had some semblance of success in their new organizations, shown to be good coaches, and his team has faltered in their absence. He hired Matt Patricia as his DC. Like, I don't know how Matt Patricia's holding down a job in this league at this point.
Yeah,
But the fall of the Eagles, I think, if I'm pinpointing it on one thing, it's not the talent on the field. The Eagles have plenty of talent on the field. It's being misutilized, and there's only so much longer the tush push is going to be legal. So, I mean, they gotta find a way to figure that situation out and get some coordinators in. And I think it could result in Nick Sirianni being out if
yeah,
if they determine that he had no part in the success and that he just hired good coordinators the first time around. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Be an interesting debacle. Did you see that Neil deGrasse Tyson thing they did on Good Morning Football about the tush push?
missed it.
So he basically like breaks down the science behind the tush push, and you just got to watch it because it's Neil deGrasse Tyson and he does what he does pretty well. But basically he describes it as like an unstoppable play, based on how it's structured, because Jalen Hurts has never been stopped on the tush push. He usually jumps into the air and the two people behind him push. So it's, God, I can't remember how he described it. I think at some point he basically said, because of the tush push, on some level, the Earth's rotation has changed.
Mm.
I was like, that seems exaggerated. But I mean, on
A little
some
bit.
level, yeah, because he made the argument that when you're in the middle of that play, your feet are attached to the ground, so your mass is now connected to the Earth's mass, and to push, you're basically you're going to have to fight that entire force. It's really complicated the way he described it, but you should check it out. And then that leads us to the final game. Houston mollywops the Cleveland Browns 45-14. Who had that on their bingo card?
I had a lot of faith in the team.
Yeah, me too.
My direct supervisor at work's a Browns fan, and he was telling me, I don't care who's out, I don't care that CJ's back. The Browns have the number one defense, and I was thinking to myself, as I have all season, right? Against all logic, but still at least semi-logical, is the fact that when you have an elite quarterback, you have a good thing, and I'm not afraid of saying that CJ Stroud is elite at this point. It's just simply true. And there's been very few. I think the Jets game is really the only game where I looked and I said, it's kind of out of reach. But every other game that we've had, like, it's been within reach. And when CJ Stroud's on the field, the Texans can win a game. Now with that in mind, I didn't think that can win a game translated to 45-14 against the number one defense in the league.
Yeah.
But a lot of the pundits in the national media kind of highlighted what ended up coming to fruition, which is that the backup, old retired, should be retired quarterback coming in and doing his thing can only go for so long before it kind of comes to a head. and that it came to a head in NRG Stadium in Houston, Texas. Joe Flacco became, human in
Yeah.
some ways. I mean, a lot of his wins came against teams that were lesser. The Texans without CJ Stroud are a lesser team.
Yep.
So I don't want to say that I was unsurprised by the result, because the scoring on the Texans side, even when you factor in that 14 of the points were defensive, was a bit excessive relative to my expectation. But I was not surprised the Texans won, just surprised by how much.
Yeah. I had them winning 34-31, and I predicted it'd come down to a fair Barron field goal. So he could reinstill faith in the Texans fan base after the missed extra point. But he did that anyway by making a field goal. So, 45-14 was not in my scope of vision there. I was thinking, Stroud was going to come in, the offense is going to do, I wanted to see more than 23 points. I figured if we can just capitalize a little bit on the mistakes that Joe Flacco is going to inevitably make, then 25 to 28 points would have been enough to win that game. And I'll take, an extra 20 on top of that. So that's hype. The pick sixes were real nice.
Extra nice.
The dude, oh my God. I was very critical of Christian Harris in the offseason and very much needed to see a lot of growth in him to make him like a viable starter and not just a guy who's out there because he's athletic. And
I agree with you. I spoke to that on the bullpen. We dropped our recap today, and I feel the exact same way about Christian Harris. I was like, are we really gonna throw him out there and just act like he's suddenly like a starting caliber linebacker? And now I'm like, I don't want to see a play with him not on the field.
Yeah,
because the dude's just got grit. He's got attitude.
that's the effect that I wanted D'Amico Ryans to have. That's the one person who I thought needed to have it the most. It's just an added benefit that Blake Cashman was also in the same room listening very intently.
I remember when we traded for Blake Cashman and people were like, a 6-round pick, it's a wasted 6-round pick on Blake Cashman. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And now he's like our best coverage linebacker. Just
Yeah.
finally found his step. I was excited to see him develop. That's a linebacker room that at the beginning of the season, like throughout the offseason, you looked at the Texans, you went, it's Denzel Perryman and who?
Exactly.
I think people thought that was going to be a high draft pick in this draft, and now that linebacker room is pretty well set.
Yeah. And with D'Amico there entrenched for a while, you hope and you assume that that's going to maintain no matter who's back there. But one hell of a game. I mean, Brevin Jordan, the 76-yard touchdown run, second fastest run by a tight end this season, longest. I think it was the second longest play by the Texans in the playoffs. I mean, finally, we get to see this man's athleticism after 2.5 years of just barely being able to be not a healthy scratch.
I mean, I think John Crumpler put it best that, watching Brevin Jordan go from fringe roster guy to like reliable tight end 2 has been quite the journey. And I think there's a lot of credit that goes to Slowick for his scheme and how it's affected, Brevin Jordan's ability to get open. That's a hot topic, is Bobby Slowick being offered like 5 head coaching interviews. That's the plight of having a defensive-minded head coach, and that's why that's a thing I'm kind of jealous of the Colts on, is the Colts by picking Steichen, who was high on my list of candidates for the reason that he's an offensive-minded head coach. They're gonna have Anthony Richardson or whoever is playing quarterback for them in the future sitting in the same scheme for as long as Steichen's there.
Yeah.
Whereas the Texans, after what happened on Sunday, I'm convinced that Bobby Slowick's probably not going to be in Houston much longer. The Texans will have to find a guy who can either run a very similar scheme, or they're going to have to teach CJ a new scheme every year until CJ can't carry the team. I mean, that's like pretty much what it's going to be.
Yeah, we don't want the same illness that Baker Mayfield had until he got to Tampa. We don't want Mariota syndrome either. We literally just want – I would love if we gotta keep churning over OCs every couple years because they're doing so well, hell yeah. But I'd love
that's
them to be from the Shanahan tree.
I've looked at so one of my friends looked at the data. I haven't looked at it personally, so this is just me speaking. I don't have the data in my brain. But in general, the offensive coordinator shuffles has not historically affected elite quarterbacks. So elite quarterbacks, when they have the offensive coordinator shuffle like that, generally tend to perform pretty consistently. Whereas guys like Baker Mayfield and Marcus Mariota, who I mean, I could have told you when the Titans drafted Mariota that wasn't going to be a long term thing. I didn't have a lot of hope or faith in him at all.
Yeah.
And same with Baker Mayfield. So like I was not surprised that the offensive coordinator shuffle did him in, but if CJ is as elite as I and many people believe he is, I don't know if the shuffle of offensive coordinators is actually going to have a huge impact.
Yeah, and that's the hope. That's the hope, is that he is one of those after Brady's rode off into the sunset, the new young buck on the scene. And you hope that he's going to try to be in that upper echelon. It's been 1 year. We got to give him more time to figure it out. But ultimately, in theory, at least in the first little bit, you want the same offensive minds guiding your players. Yes, Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and quarterbacks like that have been able to flip in and out of offensive systems at will and do whatever they wanted to do. But most of the time, the offense was built around what they wanted to do anyway, what they were good at. That's the other option, is if you're not going to follow the Shanahan tree, you got to find somebody who's going to build around what CJ Stroud does best. And those are literally the only two options. Beyond that, at OC, I don't know, we get anything else, we're going to be in a little bit of trouble, I think, just at least in the early going. Oh, God. Devin Singletary had a solid day after doing not so hot against the Colts. Good to see that again.
I mean, it was a case of passing open the run lanes, and the Colts defense never really. I don't think that we ever really did enough. I don't want to say that we didn't do enough, but like we relied a lot on explosive plays against the Colts, whereas the Texans had explosive plays against the Browns, but in general showed the ability to move the ball methodically through the air, and that is how you open up the run lanes through the passing game. So that, and also, I mean, there was just a point. I think when Steven Nelson took that pick six back to the house, that was about the point that I feel like the Colts or the Browns defense kind of gave up. So
Yeah.
at that point, you're gonna be able to run anything on them.
Yep. Jeff, we've kind of had you silent for a little bit.
Your best AJ Hawk impression.
Yeah, they. I really thought with those first time in the playoffs jitters, I thought Stroud wouldn't play as well as he did. I thought it would be a lot closer of a game in favor of the Browns. Throughout the season again, they had one of the better defenses. It had some bad games, but man, they never showed up, and the Texans never took their foot off the gas. I mean, when you have 21 attempts for 274 yards, there's some big chunk plays in there. Yeah. And Stroud looked comfortable. He looked great. He played like a veteran, and I didn't really see any of the jitters that I thought I'd see in him. Nico Collins had another fantastic game. That big play, Jordan. I mean, that wasn't all, Stroud. That was Jordan making people miss. That was a very athletic run. This team, they just wanted it more, and that's. I love Steichen. I like what he does on offense, but I think, I said it on the offseason, man. I wanted DeMeco Ryans, because I knew that this is what he could do with the defense and with the team overall. It's just that energy he has in his post game presser. He couldn't talk. His voice was hoarse. He was like, he's a really passionate dude, and I love the guy. So I'm happy for the Texans. I think, what was it, 5 games in the regular season Flacco played, and he threw like 8 interceptions. So we know that he can be a little turnover happy, but it's that Browns defense that has, kind of negated those mistakes that he makes. and kept them in games, and they just weren't there.
Yeah.
The Texans let up some big plays too, like you said, but it was nowhere near enough. Their run game
It was
was
the day
like
of the tight end.
insignificant. Yeah. Yeah,
Somebody
Njoku,
tight end
Jesus,
crazy.
man, he's a monster. But
Even Bryant was getting in on it.
it
Like
just
their tight ends were
yeah.
carving us up.
Yeah. They've had like 2 or 3 tight ends that are really solid for like 5 years. It makes no sense.
No.
It's like tight end factory in Cleveland.
Remember when they signed Hooper and they still had Njoku on the roster?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Is that
saying.
like the dumbest thing you've ever seen?
Yeah. It's like, what are we doing here, guys? And then Hooper does well and ends up leaving.
It's like to their benefit that Njoku decided to stay through that. He didn't. I don't know if he really had to. I'm not that familiar with that situation, but if I was
Yeah.
Njoku, I'd have been like, "Oh, you don't think I'm tight end one? Okay, I'll go be tight end one somewhere else."
Yeah. Would have been nice. Would have been nice if we would
Would've
have
been nice.
answered that call. But so the playoffs are set for the Houston Texans. We are traveling to Baltimore to play the 1 seed Ravens, who have not played a full game with their starters in 3 weeks now, or 3 weeks come kickoff. Lamar Jackson doesn't necessarily have the best playoff record. They do have a really solid defense. Be 2 back-to-back top 5 defenses that the Texans offense has to play. Hopefully we can get back. I think Laramie Tunsil came back, but hopefully he doesn't, get hurt again in practice or miss any time, because we're going to need the big guy. We're going to need that big guy.
I agree, and I mean the Texans when they played Lamar last time, Lamar only put up 169 yards and an interception, throwing 38 yards rushing. Those are all very pedestrian numbers. The Texans offense hadn't gelled yet. I've said it once. I'll say it 1,000 times. I like the narrative of we're not who we were when you played us last time.
Yeah.
That between the Texans and the Browns was great. I wanted the Texans to play the Ravens. I think I was. I don't think I was in the minority after analyzing it, but looking at that, most people don't want the number 1 seed to be their matchup.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the Texans are not the same team they were week 1. They're just like they're not the same team they were week 2 when they played the Colts. I mean, they've changed as a team entirely, and this is going to be a really good game.
Yeah. Jeff, you got any light preview talk?
Right. It'll be interesting. I mean, like you said, Lamar hasn't had the greatest playoff record. But man, this Baltimore's defense has been solid. I've said that about 2 other teams, so maybe the Texans will win 45-6 again. Who knows?
Yeah.
I hope it'll. Every time I talk about another team's defense, they just. But Baltimore has had pretty consistent. And Lamar Jackson, it just really depends on what version of him shows up. Like, is he the one that's going to run for 100 yards and just kind of light him up, or is he going to put up what he did earlier in the season? So it'll just be interesting to see how this one goes. I mean, I like Lamar Jackson. I think he's got he's got a ton of athletic ability. It'll just be interesting to see how the Texans can do on defense to contain him, I guess.
Jeff,
Yeah.
is this a tough matchup for you as a Colts fan since the Colts left Baltimore and y'all have some bad blood between the two of y'all? Like, are you just kind of rooting for both teams to lose, or like where are you at on this?
I mean, for the show, I guess I'm kind of pulling for the Texans at this point. It'd be nice to see them keep on going. I really, outside of that, I really don't have a dog in the fight. I just want to see a good game. I want both teams to have fun.
Just go out there and give it your best effort.
Both teams are trying very hard.
Oh God. All right. Well, I think that's about it for today's episode, boys. I want to thank you both for taking time out of your evenings to come on and talk ball with us. 35 like goal on the episode, 20 sub goal. Go follow James Roy on Twitter and YouTube. In1 Texans fan on YouTube. Just hit 700 subscribers. Let's keep him going. So everybody be good people.